Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today, and welcome to the third part of the webinar, Innovation and Entrepreneurship in China from Latin America and Spain. This session today will be about investment and the innovation ecosystem in China. And for this, we're lucky to have two spectacular speakers, Mr. Javier Romero and Mr. Oscar Ramos. Mr. Javier Romero has been leading technology investments for the last 20 years in private and public equities of some of the most innovative Sorry, my apologies, some technological issues. So I was just saying that Mr. Javier Romero has been leading technology investments for the last 20 years in private and public equities of some of the most innovative companies in history. He also founded China Link Capital in 2007. And China Link Capital is a venture capital firm in Shanghai that is specialized in technological sectors such as cloud computing, renewable energies, smart cities, and biotechnology. Over the past years, it has floated more than 20 portfolio companies in Asia and the US, some as successful as Sangro Power and or Tsinghua Unigroup Semiconductors that some of you might know. And some other very successful ones that are still private, such as Elon Musk's SpaceX, Didi, or ByteDance. Also, China Link Capital has founded Clean Air Spaces, very talented and interesting startup, whose founder, one of the co-founders, Pablo Fernandez, will be later on with us today. So thank you so much. And also Mr. Oscar Ramos, he's a partner at SOSV and a managing director and partner at MAOX. He's also a full stack innovator, and his expertise goes from product development to corporate strategy. Here in Shanghai, he leads the program in China Accelerator. He moved to China also around the same time in 2008. And since his arrival, he's been involved in innovation through product launches, go-to-market strategies, venture capital financing, and M&As for startups and multinationals. So as you can see, both of our speakers are considered top experts on the matter of the Chinese ecosystem, not only from their different points of view, but also time-wise, since their experience is over 20 years. So thank you so much to both of you for making the time and for sharing your experience with us today. This is going to be an interactive session, so we encourage attendees to use the Q&A function to ask questions and the chat to leave comments. We have compiled several questions from the registrants, but first I would like to hear from Mr. Romero and Mr. Ramos a little bit more about China Link Capital and SOSV, together with their perception of the Chinese investment and innovation ecosystem in China. So without further ado, please, the microphone is yours. So I don't know if Mr. Romero or Mr. Ramos would like to start.
Oscar, go ahead. Okay. So thank you very much, Laura. It's a pleasure being here. And yes, as you said, we started doing investment in China in 2007. Our fund tried to be a bridge between China and let's say the West. So basically all our investments has a China angle. Either we invest in US and European companies with an unique technology and try to bring them into China, or the other way around, we find innovative companies in China which has a huge potential to go international. For instance, in the last 12 months, we invested in Sinohai in Shandong province, which is the largest electrolyzer manufacturer in China for green hydrogen. As we all know, green hydrogen is booming worldwide. Is supposed to be one of the key technologies for decarbonization worldwide. And we saw an opportunity to invest in this company who has been operating in China for the last 15 years, but didn't have much international operation. And we help them basically to create value going overseas. We already have subsidiary in Europe, setting up one in the US, and that's the sort of investment we go from outbound from China to overseas. And the other way around, we invested in a biotech company in Washington, D.C., specialized in neurological disease, because we saw the opportunity to bring the product that is genetic testing for CNS and different drugs into the Chinese market. And now we are negotiating with Chinese pharma companies to license out those technologies for the domestic market. So we are always very focused on that bridge between China and the rest of the world. Obviously, being the largest private market in the world helps a lot to scale up. And obviously, the last few years has been challenging because of the ecosystem has changed a lot for different reasons, geopolitical reasons, decoupling of economies. Obviously, COVID has a massive impact in that decoupling, and now we face another challenge. The environment is becoming more and more difficult. Obviously, we all know what happened the last, let's say, 6 months. We have experienced the largest drawdown in Nasdaq in the last 20 years, minus 28% since November 2021. That is affecting valuations, liquidity, access to capital. Inflation is increasing the cost of capital as well. So now the ecosystem is changing to invest in technology companies that were mostly based on growth to companies that has, they are either profitable or they are closer to be profitable, because obviously, to invest now in capital-intensive company has a massive cost. So this is a little bit what we do. Obviously, we need to adapt. Oscar knows very well that China has changed 20 times the last 20 years. And you have to adapt your investment model pretty much every year or every couple of years. It's very important to know regulation, ecosystem, and to be honest, it's difficult to give one's secret source or a single formula for success in China, because every company is different, every sector is different, but obviously the market is huge, the opportunity is huge. If you are able to make it here, it makes a massive difference for the scale of the company and the business worldwide. So, Oscar?
Good. Yeah, thank you very much. Great pleasure to be here today. I'm audible, yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to participate in this forum, connecting China, Latin America, the Spanish-speaking world, and share some of the experience in venture capital. So for us, SOSV, the fund that I'm a partner of, is a global venture capital fund, and what makes us relatively different is that most of the funds tend to have a specific geographic focus. So if you look at large funds, we have like right now something like $1.6 billion under management. So we kind of qualify among relatively large funds. And these funds tend to have a geographic focus because they have a specific China fund, they have an India, US, Europe, Africa. We use a different approach and we invest globally. So in my case, I'm based in Shanghai, but I'm actually looking and exploring potential investment opportunities anywhere in the world. So looking at other parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, India, South Asia, Africa, and of course, Latin America as a big area of opportunity. We're early stage, so we tend to invest early when the companies have what we like to call early product market fit, which sometimes is very difficult to define because for some industries, early product market fit could be zero revenue, and for some industries could be a significant amount of revenue if you look at financial metrics. But we look for something that is ready to be scaled, something that has at least enough validation that somebody cares about it, and then from there we invest. In my case, being in China, obviously I have a lot of exposure to the market, and we look at the exposure or to the market in terms of investments in a way that has been evolving dramatically over time. When everything started 11 years ago, China, believe it or not, was a very cheap place to develop software. So people will come to China to develop software, and then they will take that software and either take it to the markets, normally more developed markets where there were more opportunities for monetization. Soon people realized that actually China was itself a very interesting market with a very big opportunity, and then there was a focus on the consumer side. We went through another wave where the competition in China started to become extremely difficult and very tough. So companies really had to improve their efficiency, and in that case, innovation is a big aspect of what can help a company be competitive. So that's where the growth of B2B and B2C enterprise companies started to grow. Today, it's quite interesting in this downturn that this venture capital winter, where China venture capital has reduced to a half. Everything is slowing down everywhere. In the US, more or less, we're talking about a 25% drop. China is approximately a 50% drop. But as everybody that has been in China long enough, they know that not everything is equal. In our case, today, our approach to invest in China is mostly on companies that play a role in the cross-border space. Companies that are connecting China with the world, building products in China and then exporting those products. Could be digital products, could be hardware products, or companies that are bringing to China something or areas where for whatever reason China has a gap and a need, a demand. And bringing those companies has been a very different experience. In our case, we don't have every year we invest in around 150 to 200 new portfolio companies. In my case, I get exposure to a portfolio in the software space, which tend to be around 50 companies. And investing globally, China represents just a small part of that. It might be something like a 20% of our overall investment. And what we're seeing is those companies in the cross-border space are actually doing really well at this moment. I mean, our companies are not only closing rounds of funding, they are actually having oversubscribed rounds that is allowing them to close additional funding in 2 or 3 months. And this is something that I think shows a bit what is one of the reasons we were having this session on Latin America, Spain opportunities, because some of these companies are literally using and educating, are using all the expertise and know-how on business models that were developed in China, created in China, mature in China, and they are now exporting them to other parts of the world. One of these companies, not targeting specifically Latin America, but in this case, targeting America, but Latin America will come into their case. Basically, like everybody here has seen the growth of Douyin and TikTok and how things evolve. And around that ecosystem, there's been a lot of video commerce happening. So this company has a very strong artificial intelligence solution to automate product identification, product mapping, building consumer profiles. And with that, they're already becoming in the US one of the largest social commerce players in that area. We're seeing also a big number of companies targeting other markets before the crackdown in India. Out of the top 100 mobile apps in India, 70 of them were of Chinese origin. If you look at markets like Brazil, the top 100 apps in the App Store are heavily dominated by Chinese players. But as this market becomes more competitive, as entrepreneurs in Latin America realize that they don't only have to look at the US as a source of inspiration, and that they need to look also to the East and explore China, India, and Asia in general, local entrepreneurs are embracing those numbers. And because they know those models, as they know the models and they have better capacity for execution locally, that creates an opportunity that Chinese investors are also exploring. In our latest demo day, we have a company from Latin America, and the amount of interest that company had from Chinese investors has been astonishing. And with that, I'm going to just return it back to Laura. I'm sorry if my introduction was a bit longer. Just wanted to share a few ideas, hopefully to spark conversation.
No, very, very interesting. Many concepts. Thank you to you both. And both of you were mentioning that you act as a bridge between China and also the West. So with that, given that and given your experience, could you summarize in some bullet points what are the downsides that you see currently in China and the main opportunities for these both sides? Downsides and opportunities currently.
I think it depends very much sector by sector. It's very difficult to generalize, but obviously when you try to work in a sector that is data driven and you have to manage data of Chinese citizens, is becoming more and more difficult, regulatory wise, especially for foreign invested companies and foreign funds. While I see the opportunities going more toward decarbonization industry, what we were saying before about renewable energies, green hydrogen, electric vehicles, etc., that has still a massive potential, not only because of the domestic market is the largest in the world, but also because it's scalable outside of China. And another sector we tend to prefer the last couple of years is biotech. Because obviously living standards are improving in China, disposable income. So there is more and more concern about health and more affordability. So these two sectors, which tend to be relatively friendly for foreign investment and also are highly scalable, I think is where the opportunities reside, especially for foreign entities who want to come into China. In the other direction, in the outbound, I tend to agree with Oscar that is the Chinese company has excelled in social media business model and B2C, etc. So these where startups in China has the most advantage overseas. So I think that's what is the difficulties and the opportunities reside on the last couple of years in China.
I think from my side, I think the elephant in the room that sometimes is a bit like sensitive to discuss, and is a massive obstacle is that have been the changes in regulation. And changes in regulation is something that at least at a certain stage of investment for it has created lots of problems for certain sizes of rounds that are very important and necessary. On the other way, I actually I think that some of these regulatory changes were absolutely necessary. The walled garden that WeChat and that Tencent and Alibaba created, that was theoretically to fight against each other, was actually used to prevent a lot of innovation from happening. Any small startup, they said, they used to say that they have the option of Tencent, Alibaba, or death. Very few of them are able to become large enough to survive and to be able to reach a situation where they actually have an opportunity. And I think those changes are at the same time a very, very, very difficult challenge to in terms of stability. What's going to happen? What is going to be how I'm going to be restricted to operate in the gaming sector? Things have been really, really tough in the K-12 online education. Things have really wiped out the landscape of opportunities and multiple levels. But on the other side, I think that mid-long term, some of them are changes necessary in society. Some of them are changes that will actually spark more grassroots innovation, because there were a lot of things that were not happening because people was literally just simply not trying to do things. I think also that that China has had for a long time a massive amount of investment going to consumer internet companies, and that has changed a lot the way a lot of entrepreneurs have been managing their products. The Chinese companies went from a very strong focus on product and having products that they really converted, that were really engaged with consumers, they really retained, that they were very effective in what they were trying to achieve, to a more growth-oriented approach where a lot of the funding that was raised was directly thrown into advertisement and customer acquisition, and just say, we try, and then whatever sticks, we'll see if we can continue. I think that's also going to be something that although seen as something difficult, it's going to be a big opportunity. And same thing for talent. I mean, one of the things that for China has been very, very challenging has been being able to have enough talent to cover all the needs of the technology startups they were trying to develop. And I'm not talking only about developers or our entry-level developers. No, Javier works a lot in companies in the deep tech space, where to create a basic developer, to educate a basic developer, maybe 4 years of education, a couple of years of work experience. In 6 years, you have someone that can operate. But when you're looking at scientists, when you're looking at people that can actually do and create very advanced technology on multiple fields, this path to education is way longer, and it's also more painful, because the alternative of being working in your PhD or in a lab is pretty tough compared to working in other areas. But I do believe there are industries where we're seeing a lot of opportunities, and we're going to see more and more opportunities. Steel, logistics, supply chain, manufacturing, all the industries that are going to support the changes that China will need to make to adapt to this new reality are going to be really big. Some of them are boosted by macroeconomic situation. Some of them are boosted by huge investment coming from the government, or semiconductors, etc.
Thank you so much. And following with that is a very interesting topic, especially given the current situation. We were talking a lot about the role of China also in Asia. Do you see it, as Oscar was mentioning, the talent, and now since the different restrictions, do you see it shifting to other places in Asia, or what would be the role of China in Asia in terms of entrepreneurship, investment, innovation?
Well, China is already, I think, if you look at Southeast Asia, like basically almost any Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia is actually a very interesting market, because you do have companies that they have been the first to embrace that they can learn from China, and they can learn from the US, or the West, if you want to say. But the US is where you see a lot of the innovation, at least in my sector, where I focus more on software companies. And I think China is going to continue having a lot of influence there. The amount of funds is the first natural market for a lot of funds. I think there was a generation of funds that they expanded to Southeast Asia, that they expanded to India. Now they were cut. Now they're back to invest in India. But I think it's going to slow down significantly, and those companies are the ones that now are looking at Africa, are looking at Latin America, where a lot of the successful business models are actually very similar to what was developed in China. So I think that corridor is still going to be there, and all the funds that today are seeing complexity to deploy capital in China are going to be looking at Southeast Asia as a first market. So I think that market is going to be relatively active.
No, I think I tend to agree with Oscar. Actually, Southeast Asia is a little bit like the backyard of China. Obviously, there are many cultural similarities, and it's relatively easy to expand for Chinese companies into Southeast Asia. India was also very interesting, but for geopolitical reasons, obviously Chinese investment was not welcomed anymore in India. I don't think that is going to improve anytime soon. And unfortunately for outbound investment of Chinese funds and Chinese companies overseas, now geopolitics play a very important role. We see that, every day on the news. And because of my experience, I have experienced You know that 10 years ago, it was Chinese investment was very welcome in the US, in Europe, in Latin America, in all around the world. And today it's getting more and more difficult for foreign companies to accept Chinese money. So geopolitics is playing a massive role nowadays in that cross-border investment. And to be honest, I don't expect the situation to improve anytime soon. I think it's going to get much worse. So I think Chinese money will tend to focus on China, not because they decide to do so, because they will not be welcomed overseas.
Thank you so much. Very interesting points. And since we have many startups here today and also in streaming, what do you think, in your wide experience, what are some of the deal breakers that you have experienced or that you often encounter when it comes to investing in both Chinese and Western companies?
Well, many deal breakers.
So they don't do it.
Many deal breakers, but obviously, you have to have a checklist in order to make an investment. As we said before, the scalability, the strong team, regulatory issues, very important. So, but I think the most important thing is that you see that the business is scalable and is sustainable. Sustainable in the sense that it's either profitable or will become profitable very soon. For us, the most important thing is that scalability and sustainability of the company. That's why we tend to invest, as Oscar was saying, in deep tech, because obviously once you have a unique technology, everything becomes easier. When it's very difficult to train someone in basic research in semiconductor or in biotech or in solid state batteries. You need decades to reach that sort of technology know-how. So once you find a company who has that know-how and that technology, we love that, and then that's where we go big in terms of investment, because we see that it's highly scalable. Every market will need exactly the same product, and you have a unique competitive advantage in the long term.
And how about you, Oscar? What are your thoughts? Especially also SOSV, because China Link, they're focused more in deep tech, but also you also focus in business models, right? You also invest sometimes in companies.
Well, we invest a lot in everything. So there's actually, I mean, we're there's a category that's called tough tech, which is like the toughest of the deep tech, and we're the most active investor in that area. So we do a lot of deep tech, a lot of hardware investments, a lot of biotech investments. We make a lot of investments in therapeutics, in cellular agriculture, and a lot of areas. But those are areas that normally we don't do in China. What we do in China, it tends to be more hardware companies or companies that will use technology to disrupt an industry. One of our soon to become unicorn companies is a company called Bonnie and Clyde that some of you maybe have seen in Shanghai. Is a cosmetics company, is a retail company, but the company internally has 70% of their staff data scientists, and that's because it's basically a 21st century digital cosmetics company where data is the one that defines what needs to be offered at what price, what packaging, what color. Everything is not decided by a genius that in a room decides what they want to do. It's based on consumer trends and consumer demand, and a very agile production system that can get everything done very, very fast. But in terms of your question, in terms of what are the deal breakers, I'll say that there are two parts where we see deal breakers. The first one is, it's not really a deal breaker, is why we decide to pass in a company, and why do we think those companies normally are not good candidates for investment. And I'll say that I totally agree. I think the first thing that Javier said is you need to have an unfair advantage. You need to have something that is very unique. But once you have that, the next thing that is very important is execution. Okay, so if you are able to spot a good opportunity, that makes you a very, very good consultant. Okay, if you're really good at designing a good strategy, that makes you also a very good consultant. But the difference between consultants and entrepreneurs is always execution. Delivering a PowerPoint is not the task of an entrepreneur, because that execution needs to be iterated, needs to be adapted. Once you take anything to the market, a lot of things will be different than the way they look. In any research that you do is never going to be as strong as taking a product to market and having to take it there. So I think that's where we see that a lot of situations where we don't see that fit. We don't think that the team that is working on that company can have that mindset, that because you need to have on one side like the scientist mindset, where you're very disciplined and you work on the science, etc. But you also need to be a bit of a parrot, no? And part of our work when we work with our companies in biotech is to teach them how to use the lab in a different way, how to use all the resources that they have, how the companies that are working on hardware prototyping, how they do hardware prototyping Shenzhen style, where the cycles of innovation are 1 day, not 3 months, the way are in other parts of the world. It's not about perfection. Sometimes like, hey, let's try. It needs to be an educated try, but it needs to be a trial. And then the second area where we see deal breakers sometimes is not understanding what makes a difference in terms of an investor. An investor is a partner in your company, somebody that you're bringing into your company, and not having that understanding, not being able to understand that you are sharing your company and you're sharing your journey, you're sharing your future with somebody, and not having that partnership attitude, but looking at the investor as an ATM where you go, you get money. It's like, hey, we'll talk in a few months. That is a massive deal breaker. When you don't see that willingness of collaboration, that willingness of be transparent, or adding any type of governance into the company, that is a big, that for us is a big red flag.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, we have a lot of startups that always want to come to China just as a source of money, right? They just see China as that or as a big market, and that tends to fail. So thank you so much. We have a question about hydrogen. So they say to Mr. Romero, how do you see China local government-led guidance fund in collaboration with individual and institutional investors in boosting development of tech startups in certain tech areas? For example, hydrogen that is very governmentally policy-driven.
I mean, the Chinese government is supporting massively startups and companies in the hydrogen space, green hydrogen space. I mean, the only difference between, let's say green hydrogen and blue hydrogen or gray hydrogen, because hydrogen has been around for 100 years, is basically the source of electricity, of power you use to produce hydrogen. In our case, green hydrogen is produced out of renewable energies, mostly solar and wind, and that's what it makes the hydrogen green, no? My team has been analyzing the green hydrogen value chain in China for the last 2 years. We analyzed 120 companies, everything from the pure generation of hydrogen with electrolyzer, transportation, fuel cells, hydrogen buses, hydrogen trucks, storage, hydrogen refueling station, etc. And we found massive support from central government, municipal government, provincial governments, all types of subsidies for this type of companies, from R&D subsidies to subsidizing the acquisition of buses and trucks, etc. We expect that to create a virtuous circle. We are seeing now how China is becoming the leader in LCOH, worldwide levelized cost of hydrogen. That is basically what it costs you to produce a 1 kilogram of hydrogen. And that will make China, in my opinion, that's why we have invested heavily in this sector the last 12 months. We expect that to bring massive value to the Chinese economy. And we are certain that same that happened in the solar energy, it will happen in the green hydrogen energy. China will become the #1 industrial power in green hydrogen worldwide. So it's clear the strategy of the government, highly supportive, and it's working. It's working very well. That's why it's one of our priority investment themes alongside biotech, as I mentioned before, in the last 12 months.
Thank you so much. And there's also one question for Mr. Ramos. You were mentioning before, because we have several startups coming from Latin America. So you were mentioning before that you perceive the trend of some VCs. There's a trend to perceive some interest in startups in Latin America. Could you explain us a little bit more about that, with a focus of startups that are in Latin America and they are interested in the Chinese market? Oscar?
Well, it's not. They are not interested in. So I haven't seen any interest in Latin American startups that want to enter the Chinese market. What I've seen is interest from Chinese investors investing in companies in Latin America that are cloning Chinese business models. That is what I've seen. Everybody there is looking for the new Pinduoduo, the new Pingaoishan, for these models. You'd see a lot, but. In general, the problem is that the Chinese market is very tough for foreign companies. For consumer companies, unless you are very, very, very niche and something very specific, I'll say forget about it. There's other markets out there way more accessible. But for consumer, just forget. In B2B, there's opportunities, no question asked. But in B2B, you need to understand that China is a very competitive market where you have a lot of talent that is willing to start their own companies. So if you come to China with a B2B company that can be easily cloned, it's not only going to be cloned, it's going to be cloned and it's going to be improved 10 times better. So you need to come here with a unique value proposition that is difficult to clone. And sometimes, as Javier was saying earlier, technology and IP, it is potentially a good advantage. No, we do have a case, for example, of a company. It's actually one of our Spanish companies coming to China also in the biotech space. In this case, digital therapeutics, leveraging the camera of the phone to diagnose early stages of dementia, and also to provide a treatment that basically some exercises that you can run guided from your phone that allow to delay the evolution of these neurodegenerative conditions. And that company is based on 10 years of research of one of the founders. They have a global patent. They have a portfolio of global patents on multiple biomarkers, very unique product. And they have an edge in China. They have an edge because there's a need, and that company brings in a solution that is top of what they do in the world. And that's how they manage to, and even in that case, what they try to do is actually what Javier said. They look for a distributor. They come here, and the last mile needs to be developed and executed by someone else. We have other cases of other companies that come here with companies that have like Tencent, Alibaba, ByteDance as their major clients, because what they provide is something, again, very unique and top of the category in the world. Otherwise, not interesting. But cloning business models in your market, if you prove that you understand the model and that you have a local advantage because you can execute better locally, that's a very different case. And the models where you will see these type of investment tend to be, the industries tend to be very specific. You'll see a lot of social commerce, you'll see a lot of gaming, you'll see a lot of mobility, you'll see like areas where China has excelled in the past.
Thank you so much. And we have so many startups in deep tech, especially in biotechnology. So this question goes to Mr. Romero. Since some of the startups funders are very focused on the technology, they were wondering what are some of the key metrics that are tracked during the investment process here for local investment that are different from the Western, or any key metrics that you would advise them to look into.
When it comes to biotechnology, you mean?
Yes.
When it comes to biotechnology, the metrics are pretty much the same, because obviously the biotechnology sector is highly regulated to take a product to the end user, in this case usually patients. You need a number of clinical trials, and they are pretty much the same if the FDA or is the EMA in Europe or the Chinese FDA. So what you tend to see, what you tend to analyze is, of course, you have a patented product, otherwise you cannot start a clinical trial, that the regulator has allowed you to start the clinical trials because it's an unmet need or improve certain therapeutics or treatment available in the market. And then, as you know, in the biotechnology sector, you have mostly 3 phases of clinical approval. So the more advanced the product is in that clinical approval, if it's phase 3, obviously, you have more certainty that the treatment is working. And it gives you a unique position because all the clinical trials are public. So you pretty much know where your drug stands at that point of time compared to other innovative novel treatments that will be approved in the near future. So when it comes to metrics, is obviously you have to make an analysis of the addressable market. Is different if you have a unique drug for Parkinson that to an orphan disease, because obviously the prevalence of Parkinson in China is 5 million people, and the prevalence of an orphan disease that could be dystonia is 20,000 people. So obviously the size of the market is different. And then when it comes to your competitive advantage, it depends very much, as I said before, what is the clinical efficacy of your treatment compared to others. So when we invest in biotech, we use those 2 metrics. What is the prevalence, total addressable market for that specific drug? Obviously, if it's an unmet need, your drug becomes a monopoly in that specific phenotype, in that specific disease. And then we analyze what is the probability of that drug being approved. Because you have to bear in mind, 90% of the drug who start clinical trials are never approved. So it's a high risk, high reward business in this case.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And not to extend this so long, I'm going to change to another topic that has our audience very interested. Is to Mr. Ramos, how do you view the impact of the Generation C in China to shape the ecosystem for the e-commerce, new consumption, and so on?
Well, I mean, to be honest, the big change I think happened really with the millennial community, where there was a massive jump on a culture of savings to a culture of enjoying life, and I think that with Generation Z, one of the key things that is different from that change is there's a increasing preference for domestic brands. So that and domestic products. That is something that has a strong impact in some areas, and that's one of the reasons why, for example, a brand like Bonnie and Clyde, for example, they actually, what they are today is a pivot. They started originally building this SaaS solution, this software solution, and that they were offering to brands. And as they were analyzing the data, they realized there's really a trend here. And there's a massive unmet demand that is not fulfilled by players, and that's how they started to create domestic brands. And you've seen that in other categories with other products from food to fashion, cosmetics, and some other elements. So I think that might be the major change on Generation Z that I can think about. That being said, I don't invest a lot of consumer, and definitely, I mean, I don't remember the last time I invested in a consumer company in China. Most of my companies in China they do have a strong technology element in what they do, and they tend to be more B2B.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And we also have another question in here before we close the session, and we will ask you about some key messages since we covered so many topics. So a lot of our startups, some of them assisting today, they have some questions about the US or the Chinese market when it comes to investment. I know it's very general, but we get this question a lot. So what would be the key points that you would mention about US investment versus Chinese investment? Very general.
What's the question?
Very generic.
Very generic, I know, but we have it all time.
Is difference or differences or? Differences, key opportunities, and what would be your advice for some sectors? Very general, but. I'll say that surprisingly there's more similarities than differences. Sometimes people try to think about the differences. I see sometimes even more difference between the European venture capital and the American venture capital and the China venture capital and the European venture capital. So I think China and US actually have a lot of things in common in the way they think. The first generation of venture capitalists in China, a lot of them came from the US, and they brought a lot of the theses that then they were able to localize to a specific market, specific demand. But there's a lot of practices that are relatively common. And at the beginning, there were some practices here that were a bit less friendly, but today, even when you look at term sheets, when you look at investment practices, I'll say that the investment landscape here is pretty sophisticated. It's fast. The people is looking for big wins. So in Europe we sometimes call venture capital risk capital. We don't call it venture capital. There's more thoughts about the risk that there is about the venture. So I think from that point of view, there's a lot of things that are very similar. It is true that I think that sometimes here there's a bit more interest in details to be defined, and I'm more looking for more clarity. Not so much on the vision side, but more on the operation side, on the execution side, and to a certain degree, that's also I think driven by the background of the investors and a lot of the founders. So the same way that the typical investor in the US, a lot of investors in the US, they come from a technology background, a product background. A lot of at least in my category, in technology venture capital, you have a lot of PhDs in the deep tech funds, etc. And on the funder side, you have the same. In China, it's not the case. Both on the investor side as well as the funder side, you have a lot of people that come with a business background that are able to articulate more clearly a holistic view of the opportunity, and that is what eventually leads to an advantage, which connects with something that I shared earlier, which is the execution. It's not execution about building something; it's about building the right thing and then take it to market and operate it in the right way.
I think I agree with Oscar. I think there are many similarities between the Chinese and the US VC market, and I think one of the main reasons is because of the scale of these two economies. Obviously, in Europe, when you have a VC fund, tends to be a country-focused VC fund, either in the UK or in Spain or in Denmark. So the scalability of the business to invest in is completely different than the Chinese or the US market. And that gives you more room to take risks, because you have 10 portfolio companies and just one of them make it in China or in the US, you are almost secure an unicorn. In Spain or Italy or UK, even if you have a big win, it's very difficult that it will become a unicorn. So obviously, you have to make it right probably 50% of the time in Europe, while in China or the US, if you make it right 20-30% of the time, you are more than fine as a fan. So that allows you, as Oscar was saying, in Europe tend to be more risk aware. So because obviously the metrics of a successful investment is completely different. So That's why I think in US and China it's much easier to be a VC than in Europe.
Thank you so much. It's very useful, especially some of our startups. They always ask us, oh, they're a little bit scared about the VCs here in China. So it's great to hear that. So since we were planning to end now, thank you so much for your time. I don't know if you would like to send any key messages. We will forward the information for China Link Capital and also for SOSV. And thank you so much.
I think it was a pleasure. And if there is any startup out there that they have a deep tech and they believe they have a unique technology, please let me know. That I'm pretty sure we'll be very happy to look at it.
Yeah, on my side, great pleasure to be here. Thank you for accommodating Laura, Xavier, Mercedes to make it possible. So a great pleasure to be here. Maybe just a parting thought for this is I think that sometimes there's a lot of the advice that is given to startups regarding what China could play in the role that is to focus on the way large companies think about. Like large companies move a lot of the economy in the present. Startups move the economy of the future, and a lot of the things that are said, they just don't apply. And it's not only that they don't apply; it's that sometimes they can actually be negative. So that would be the only thing, try to take all of this advice that sometimes is very valuable and is relevant, but you need to use it in the way that you want to do it. And then same thing, for me, looking at startups everywhere in the world, looking at consumer, internet, more B2B and enterprise. And if you have like something that seems that your customers love and they like, and you want to take it to the next level, happy to have a chat and work with you on that.
Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you very much.